about walking Appalachian.
Hey.
We have a, we don't know, we got any people excited. Okay. And we have slides. Have it somewhere in there. This is. Dude.
That's brilliant.
That's not good. All right. There we go.
Seashells.
Well, welcome. A year ago, almost to the day, earlier this week, we started February 21st. We started our hike. I hiked it with my son, and a lot of folks ask if, I've been reading about that for a long time. I really had not done it. It wasn't something for me. But when we were living in Pennsylvania the first time, I was scoutmaster for our local Boy Scout group, and both of my sons went through the program. He became an Eagle Scout, and we'd go camping every month, and several times on those backpacking trips, we hiked sections of the trail, or we hiked sections of the Golden Eagle Trail or the Horseshoe Trail that intersected at AT, and they'd see AT hiking. Or we'd go to Caledonia State Park, and the guys would come in all grumpy, and and he decided that that was something that was going on in his bucket list. He wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. He'd been talking about it his whole life. And in 2013, I told him, well, look, I'm going to retire next year. So if you're serious about this, let's do it. So that was really the impetus for getting going on our trip. Most folks' perception, they hear about hiking the Appalachian Trail. And most folks have read Bill Bryson's book. It's called A Walk in the Woods. What do you think about as a walk in the woods? Nice, little silver gray, little tree-lined, flat little path going through beautiful little places, cruising next to lakes and things like that. The reality was a little bit different. February 21st, when we started out, it was about 18 degrees. The wind was blowing. There were times when we hiked through snow that was 2 feet high. It was pretty brutal. So lots of snow. People don't realize how high the southern mountains, and then Georgia in the south where it's warm. 6,000-foot mountains, and there's actually more snow in the southern mountains than there is in the central states down at lower elevations. Temperatures got as low as 9 degrees. The other reality, it's hard on your body. There's a lot of rocks, and you're carrying an extra 40 pounds that you're not used to, and a lot of climbing. So I ended up with a knee injury and was off the trail for almost 3 weeks, and ended up with a cortisone shot just to get going again. It hurt the rest of the trail, and I'm still suffering from it. This is the trail. You spot it there? Those little blue arrows are pointing to white blazes. Normally the white blazes on the Appalachian Trail are on trees next to the trail, but there are places where you're way above the tree line and there's nothing but rock. So to mark the trail, they have a combination of painted white blazes on the rocks. Of course, a lot of times there's snow, so they have those rock cairns like right next to the 3 dots on the reality. That marks it when there's snow on the ground, so you can see those rock cairns. The other reality is, this is not a non-contact sport. Everyone that I knew at times had fairly significant falls. It's a lot of sprains and minor injuries. Not too many broken bones and things, but that happens. There are some places where you're going down steps that are so steep, and many of these were built in the 30s by CCD crews. And they're very steep steps. And over the years, the trees around there kind of uproot things, so the rocks that were there as steps that had been probably pretty nice at one time are no longer stable. And one of the times I fell and it went down so hard that it actually peeled the wallet out of my pants pocket. And I probably slid down 20, 30 feet. He was behind me at that time, fortunately, because had he been in front of me, number one, I would have fallen into him. Number two, I would have gotten up and not known that I had lost my wallet. It actually just stripped it right out of my pants pocket. So, we're going to talk about the trail, give you some detail on the numbers on the trail. We'll talk about some trail terms, a little bit about the gear, and then I'll kind of take you on a tour, an easy tour, looking at the pictures. So, Appalachian Trail by the numbers, 2,200, 14, 5,000,000, 5,500, 515,000, 180, 165,000, 262. Yeah, what does all that mean? Okay, 2,200 is roughly the length of the trail. 2,189.2 was the official distance in 2014. A lot of folks don't realize it, but the trail changes slightly every year. They rebuild sections of the trail. Sometimes it's so destroyed that they actually create a different area. But it moves around so that the distance actually changes quite a bit. It actually travels through 14 different states, starting in Georgia on Springer Mountain and ending up at Mount Katahdin. 5 million, that's about approximately the number of steps that you travel. That's at about a 27, 28 inch stride, which is much longer when it's flat, but that doesn't happen very often. 5,500 is about approximately the number of calories you burn per day. It's a great weight loss program. The average person burns about 2,500 calories a day, so it's about an extra 2,000 calories. So you lose about a pound a day when you're hiking with an extra 40 pounds going up over 515,000 foot of elevation change up and down. That's nearly 100 miles worth of vertical distance. So it's a lot of steep climbing. 180, that's approximately the days that we spent on the trail. 165,000 white blazes mark the trail from Georgia to Maine. There are 262 huts or shelters along the way. About 2,500 started it in 2014. 51% got to Harper's Ferry, about half, and about a fourth, 26% actually made it the whole way. There are 31 clubs, 6,200 volunteers, and 210,000 hours spent every year on average maintaining the trail. Even though it goes through two big national parks, Great Smoky Mountains National Park and Shenandoah National Park, the trail is maintained by volunteers the entire distance. And so there are different clubs that maintain it along the hiking paths. So there's the way the trail goes. We started out down in Georgia, Springer Mountain. There were around 1,200, there were 2,500 to start. 1,267 reported in at the Appalachian Trail Conservancy midpoint in Harper's Ferry. It's actually a little less than midpoint. That's just north of there in Pennsylvania. And 653 finished in Mount Katahdin in Maine. In preparation, we kind of laid out all the gear we needed to get. And some of the stuff that we needed for the trail, you have to have a backpack. Pack cover actually goes over the outside of the pack that you slip on when it's raining. It's waterproof, but it also rolls up nice and tight, and you just tuck it in and hang it on one of your things afterwards. Sleeping bag. We went through two different sleeping bags. We moved to a lighter, but much heavier bag when we started. It had to be down to about a 10-degree bag to keep us warm enough. We also used silk liners on the inside to both keep the bag a little bit cleaner. And then on the outside, we made up a bivy sack. It's actually made out of Tyvek material, the same material they wrap on the outside of houses. And it's mostly waterproof. It's certainly water resistant. It also adds about 5 degrees of protection, and it keeps the bag from getting dirty and things like that. Tent, I didn't bring that along, or a tarp. Some people travel without a tent, but they sleep in a hammock and have a tarp over the top. Footprint is the ground cloth that goes underneath the tent. Water bottles or bladder, we actually have both, but most of the time we use a water bladder that actually fits inside the pack, and it comes out and you can get the nozzle just like a water bottle, water bladder you carry, and you can get a drink as you go along the way, so you don't have to stop and get out water. We had to filter our water, so you have to have water treatment of some kind, either chemical or filters. Probably 3/4 of the time, we could find springs that were coming right out of the mountain, and we didn't bother filtering. If the spring was back a ways, or if there was a pool in front of it, any risk of Giardia or any other bacteria, then we filtered. But so much of the time, the water was just delicious. And I just completely lost my taste for Coca-Cola, other than when I needed sugar and caffeine. Okay. Stove and cooking kit. This was our primary stove. And we never cooked anything inside a pot. We boiled water. Took about 2 minutes. It's a very efficient little stove, a little gas thing. We pop it up, fire it up, boil the water. We poured 2 cups of water, and in the evening it would usually be, especially in the winter, we had packages of hot cider that we could get. So good. Warmth and sugar, and you could just feel that. It was cold. And then later on we stopped having to drink hot water in the evenings, so we kind of dumped, and by that time we lost a lot of weight, so we're doubling up on our meals. But in the morning it was a combination. We had instant coffee that we mixed with cocoa, so we get sugar and some protein out of milk, and then coffee from caffeine. Yeah, gotta have that buzz to get it going. And so the first half would go into the cups, and the second half would go into plastic heavy-duty freezer Ziplocs. And the Ziplocs would go inside here. Fill it up with hot water inside here, close the seal, stick it inside the sleeping bag, wait 5 minutes, and it would finish cooking inside there. Mornings, 90% of the time, were oatmeal of some kind or hot cereal, and we mixed it up a lot. We put in raisins and other kind of dried fruit, pineapple, prunes, you name it. We had variety, so we tried to mix it up a little bit, give it some variety. Always threw in nuts, because nuts are dense in calories, lots of fats and some protein, so that was almost always breakfast. Lunch, always snack bars and little packets of again, for trail mix, nuts and chocolate and sugar, caffeine, calories, lots of calories. Evenings, lots of carbs. We tried to mix it in, throw in some fats as well. We always carried a little jar of olive oil with us that we add to everything. Couscous was real good. It cooked up very quickly. A lot of guys eat almost all ramen. They get just disgusted and tired of it. So we have ramen sometimes, but we put all kinds of extra stuff in it. You could buy, we found both at G&G Market and over here at Andy's, instant soup mixes. Split pea, black bean, corn chowder, but anyway, the black bean mix, you could either mix it thin like soup, or you could put in half the water, and it was like having refried beans. So we buy tortillas, we have refried beans and add cheese to it, and we have a easy-to-eat meal. So it was all cooking pretty quickly. The rest of the stuff, you know, boots, shoes, hats, all that kind of stuff. Headlamp, always had to have a headlamp, particularly early on. We didn't have that much daylight because it was, you're in the mountains with overhead. Earlier it wasn't as bad because there weren't any leaves on the trees, but you needed a headlamp every morning in the wintertime, and you barely get done in the afternoon, 4:30, and the sun's already going down and getting dark. So, where do we sleep? Probably 75% of the time in shelters, also known as huts, lean-tos. They call them different things on different sections of the trails. Mostly they were almost all open on the front, 3 sides, and a roof on top. And that was the shelter. The smallest ones held about 6. Unless it was raining, there was 8 or 10. The bigger ones would be 8 or 10, and sometimes they would double deck them so you could get.
IT guy. You can't handle it, would you?
No. Other gear stuff. Anybody know what these are?
For your shoes.
They're light crampons. They're called Yak Tracks, and they're just rubberized and have a little Velcro strap, and you put them on your feet. We didn't have that. We started out, we flew into Asheville. It had been single digits for the week before we started. We flew into Asheville, and then a friend of ours drove us down to Spring Mountain to start out. We were going to buy Yak Tracks because we knew it was going to be icy. The Asheville Fire Department had bought out everything in the city because they were fighting fires, and as the water would go down and hit the ground, it would turn to ice. The firemen couldn't stand up. So Pete and I decided, well, if we're going to have to give them up to somebody, it's better that it's going to the fire department than some casual hiker someplace. But anyway, as a result of that, we fell a lot. The first 2 or 3 days, the first night we were up there, it had been cold for so long, the ground was just frozen really deep. And that night it rained. Well, the trail is kind of a depression, and it's on a slope, so it's like a bobsled. It just completely iced over. And so we were trying to walk near the side, but a lot of that was too steep where you get on one side and you slip off the edge, but we fell a lot. Okay, the other place we would stay is with our tent. If we get to a shelter and it was full, there was overflow camping near the shelter, so we pitched a tent there. If we were in between shelters, and they average about 4.5 miles distance apart. But sometimes they were 2 miles apart, 1.5 to 2 miles apart. Sometimes they were 20 miles apart. And there were times where, the storm was coming. We had another 5 miles to go. Do we want to keep hiking and get all wet, or should we just set up? So we pitch a tent someplace by the side of the trail. Most places that was legitimate. There were other places where you had to be at least 50 feet from the trail, or you couldn't camp in a given area at all. When you got in the White Mountains, as an example, you're above the tree line. They don't want anybody camping any place above the tree line, so you have to be below about 4,500 feet, way above the tree line. We also slept in hiker hostels. And once in a while, you stop in to get your clothes cleaned and things like that. Carry one pair of clothes with you. So you're wearing the same underwear for days on end. The shirts got pretty smelly, so you can stop it and get them clean. And you get a nice bed to sleep in once in a while. We slept in the city park in Unionville, New York. It was a trail now. The trail used to come right through there. They've now moved it to where it kind of skirts the town. But they actually set it up so that hikers can go and register in the town. And if it's on a weekend or if the place is closed, then you go to the general store, you sign up, you give them your name information for security, and they let you pitch a tent up. And finally, a couple of times we'd stay in hotels if there wasn't a hostel around or it was closer and things like that. Well, we needed to do a lot of resupply. And finally, with friends. Had it not been for my buddy in Carlisle when he went down, I'd have probably left the trail. But that was where we lived just before we moved here, because I was working in the Shippensburg, just 20 miles south of there. And Tony and I used to ride our bikes to work 2 or 3 times a week. So they put us up, took care of us the whole time. We also stayed with friends in Asheville, North Carolina, a Vietnam buddy in Port Clinton, Pennsylvania, another Volvo colleague in Cornwall, Connecticut, and other friends in Lyman, New Hampshire. So along the way, the people that you meet on the trip is just spectacular. So there we are starting out. February 20th. This is actually day -1. This is the day Todd drove us down. We stayed at the Amicalola Lodge, just south of Springer Mountains. The first day we hiked 7.8 miles to get to the start of the trail. The trail is up, the trailhead is about 3,500 feet, so we started about 2,000 feet. So here we are, end of day 1. Kind of chubby and cold, and at the marker starting the second terminus of the trail. So, yes, it was cold, absolutely stunning beauty. Freezing cold, but you saw that first picture where we were walking, it was kind of misty. When there's just fog and mist blowing, it forms around little twigs of things. It's not rain, it's just mist, and it builds up, and you get these beautiful crystals on every branch of the tree. You're just walking through a crystal forest. Unbelievable. Absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so this a few days later. This was after a second snowfall. This is actually not too bad here, but this day was where we were up over our knees pushing through snow several times. And 4 days after that, we're up in Hiawassee, Georgia, 62 degrees and sunshine. Most of the snow was melting. Of course, it was also at a lower temperature. And the temperature, the lower elevations. This was just entering Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You cross a road cross a dam on a road. And as we were going across, we saw our first bald eagle, and he was cruising down in the crater below us, and then caught a thermal and just whoosh, was up above us and went out over the lake and went down and caught a fish. It was very cool. Great Smoky Mountains National, give you an idea of the scale. One of the things that everybody has with them is a hiker book, a trail log. And a couple of neat things about it. Along the bottom here, this says 1966.2. That's the distance to Mount Katahdin. So every day it goes down, clicking off those miles. And 223, that's how far it is from Spring Mountain. So whichever direction you're going, you can use the book. But the way this one's set up, it tells you both directions. It also tells you crossing points on the trail so you know approximately where you are. You can kind of guess by elevation changes as well. But when you're in flat areas, it's nice to know that. Up on top, it says 6330, and it shows a little dot. That's where spring is. So every time there's a raindrop symbol, that shows you got a spring coming. So you can kind of plan when you need to stop and refill your water supply. It also tells you where there are shelters, and those are also highlighted in the book. And it will tell you where there are road crossings, and it will tell you. Tennessee 32, North Carolina 284, Davenport Spring. So you've got these little markers as you're going along. This is the scale, and those horizontal lines are in 1,000 feet. So the top one is 6,000, so the peak there is 6,300 feet. And the low point that day was about 1,500 feet. So it was about a 5,000 foot drop. Just for scale, that's the Empire State Building off on the left there. At 102 floors, not to the top, but just to the 102nd floor, it's 1,860 steps, or about 1,240 feet. So if you kind of look there from the 4,000 up to the 5,000 foot line, or a little bit above it, so it's like going up and down the Empire State Building 3 or 4 times a day. It's pretty intense. Max Patch is a place in Great Smoky Mountains National Park where it's this fall, and you're supposed to have spectacular views. Yeah, not so much. That was actually our worst day, temperature-wise on the trail. It was, conditions-wise. It was only about 34 degrees, but it was raining. And the rain at that temperature is just brutal. We all got to the shelter and we were just huddling up. And we got in there and there was one guy there that had been there a while and he was shivering, so we all kind of covered him up. So. Not that long afterwards, we're down at a lower elevation. Spring is coming out. There were daffodils along the trail. So the other thing that was amazing, there were times when we'd go through a day, you'd be at 800 feet, and you'd finish the day at 4,000 or 4,500 or 5,000 feet, and you'd go from spring down in the lower elevations where all the trees were leafed out, the red buds were blooming and everything, and you get up to the top, not a stick of green. Even the grass was still dead. So you could go through the season changes in a few hours. Grayson Highland State Park in Virginia, they have wild ponies. And Pete put in his logbook today, I got my arm licked by a pony today. They would come and lick the salt off of all the hikers. So, that was really cool. Some of the best views. We were going through there and there were thunderstorms, and a little risky with lightning, but just gorgeous thundercloud formations and big booming lightning and lots of rocks that really reverberated. McAfee Point, McAfee Knob, this is sort of like the iconic place for a picture on the trail. So Pete and I got together there. We stopped off, we were serious about hiking the trail, but we also wanted to stop off and see things, see people. He had friends join him from college, from his Army days. I had the same thing from several different work situations and from guys that I had served with in Vietnam. And so we also stopped and saw things like Luray Caverns. Maybe not as big as Mammoth, but absolutely stunning. Great view. So we had a great time off there visiting that. And May 13th, this is been sort of the psychological midpoint of the trail in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, the Appalachian Trail. What's that?
You picked up Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, yeah. And a few days later, that's when my knee went out. So I would walk along, and it had been kind of a little hurting, but not bad, you know. Get to walk along, and it went from a little pain to just took me to my knee. It was very sharp, very severe, and so we stopped, turned around and went back and hitchhiked from Smithburg into Hagerstown, Maryland. There happened to be a VA clinic there. By the way, we had relatively good cell resection within a day or two, almost always on the trail. As remote as it is, you're always relatively close. You get to Mountain Peak. Everybody turns on their cell phones because everyone wants to keep loved ones informed of where you are and how you're doing, and things like that. So we tried to send text messages and occasionally post pictures of what we're doing and have a good time. So from May 16th to June 4th, this is where Tony and his wonderful family put us out. And then we continued on, once it got better, in through what is lovingly referred to as Rocksylvania. Pennsylvania has lots of rock ridges that you go along. And the trail is frequently like this. So the white blazes are painted on the rocks, and you're just walking over these giant rocks here. Great way to start out. Got through Pennsylvania and crossing the Delaware River at Delaware Water Gap, which is where, Jersey. And halfway across the bridge, they've got a sign there that says Delaware Water Gap, Spur Mountain, 1,293 miles that way, Mount Katahdin, 895 miles that way. Yes, we're over the hump. We're on the downhill side. We're on our way. We got to New Jersey. We had seen one bear the entire first half of the trip. We saw 5 bears in Jersey within 3 days. Wow. That's great. And this boy was pretty big. He was probably about 400 pounds. We came around the corner, there were two of them sitting on the trail, and they split. And one went uphill and one went downhill. So I said, well, what do we do now? And I said, well, let's take pictures. We took pictures, tried to get movies. He goes, okay, buddy. So we just walked on through and they kept going. So we had a good time. I didn't mention it, but in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, almost the entire length of the trail within the GSMP, you're going back and forth between the North Carolina and Tennessee border. You'd be in Tennessee 1 hour and back in North Carolina, then back in Tennessee. You're back and forth throughout the whole length of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The AT runs right along the border. And much of that same thing is true in New York and Jersey. That section of Jersey up there, we were constantly going back and forth. Unionville was actually in New York. We walked up just on the outskirts of town, welcome to New Jersey. A little bit later, we were back in New York again. So then we ended up in New York, crossed over the Hudson, and there's a place on the trail where there's where the trail crosses the Metro North rail line, and on weekends, they stop at that place. They don't stop there during the week because it's a commuter line. But on weekends, that sign for Appalachian Trail, they stop the train there and you catch a ride and you can go into New York City. My knee was hurting, so I had to have and by the way, at this point, Glenn flew out. We were kind of planning when he could join us. So he flew out for a long weekend. We had one day together in New York. They both had friends from their days in San Francisco State that were joining them. Fennerty's is a bar in New York City that is San Francisco crazy. So they have 49ers and Giants memorabilia all over. So we had a great time there, and all of their friends. This guy here was in a production of The King and I. Another guy had just finished doing Big Fish on Broadway, so a lot of their friends are here and have a good time.
It's like your knee is hurt.
Well, it's just knocked up on me. Okay, thanks. Well, well, that's where the video comes, but I could skip that, but now it won't let it. Even escape out of presentation. No, it's pretty cool.
That's right.
So we got restart the program. So in New York City, the last thing we did, we got in Times Square, the three of us together, and we sang, New York, New York, a wonderful town, the roses up and the batteries down, the people ride in the hole of the ground, New York, New York, it's a wonderful town. And we did that. One of those stripper gals that comes out, they're painted ladies, they got a little G-string and everything else is just paint. She jumped in front of us and wanted to be in the picture. And Glenn says as she's jumping in, that's okay, but we're not going to pay you. We were doing it for the singing and having a good time. Anyway, so we left New York City, took the train out. As we were leaving that morning to get to the Metro North and go back up to upstate New York, we're walking along, there's some construction guys going along there. And one of the guys says, really good to you go camper. And he turned around and said, actually, we're hiking the Appalachian Trail, hiking. Ooh, up in, hooked in. Just a classic New York thing. Yeah, sure. Why not?